Jesus holds all things together. It doesn't matter how bad your life has become. It doesn't matter how many things have hit the fan. It doesn't matter how unraveled everything might have become in the last few months, few years, few decades, or whatever. Why? Because Jesus can hold all things together. Well, Satan uses this as an opportunity to capitalize on this moment. Here's what happens. Luke 22, verse 3. It says, then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12. Luke says in Luke 22, Satan entered Judas. Now this brings up a theological question that some people have. Can Satan enter you? Is it possible to become demon-possessed? Can Satan just enter whoever the heck he wants to enter? Is that possible? Now that's a good question. A couple days ago, I was watching an episode of Nat Geo, National Geographic, and the particular episode that I was watching was all about zombie ants. Has anybody ever heard of zombie ants before? I'd never heard of this until just a couple days ago. Apparently, zombie ants, for those of you who don't know, down in the Amazon, the rainforest in the Amazon, there's a fungus that lives down there, and this fungus can infiltrate ants, and the fungus gets into the brain of the ant, and it eats the brain of the ant, and the fungus takes over control of the ant's body. And the ant's body basically turns into a zombie. Like the ant isn't alive anymore. It got eaten by the fungus from the inside out, and the fungus uses the body of the ant to get around, and they call these zombie ants. I had never heard of this before just a few days ago. I see this Nat Geo episode, and I'm like, wow, new fear unlocked. Never going to the Amazon rainforest, you know? I don't want to get eaten by a fungus that takes over my brain, you know? Anyway, so people, when they think about demon possession, is that what Satan does? Does he somehow just get into your brain, get into your mind? Can Satan take over you? I mean, Luke 22:3, it says, Satan entered Judas. So can Satan do that to you? Can he make you a zombie ant, a zombie human? Can Satan just take over and control you? Well, not necessarily. Why not? Well, here's what you got to understand about Satan. Satan is not just the opposite of God. God is what's called omnipotent. Omnipotent meaning that God is all-powerful. Well, Satan is a created entity who fell from grace. So he's not the opposite of God. Satan doesn't have all the opposite powers of God. He's not all-powerful. Satan is not omnipresent. He's not omnipotent. He doesn't have those same capabilities. But because of that, Satan knows he doesn't have the same capabilities of God, but Satan, what he does do is he emulates God. He imitates Jesus. Let me give you an example. One of the things that Jesus says in Revelation 3:20, he says, here I am. I stand at the door and I knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. These are the words of Jesus, the words of Christ. He says, I stand at the door and I knock. And truth be told, some of you, Jesus has been knocking on the door of your heart for a long time, and you just need to open the door. Jesus says, I stand at the door and I knock. Well, Satan is not the opposite of Jesus, but Satan observes Jesus, and he takes what Jesus does, and he tries to do it himself. He imitates Jesus. Imitation is the greatest form of flattery, right? Well, here's what Satan does. Genesis 4:7 says, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Sin is crouching out your front door. Satan is crouching outside of your door. If you're taking notes, write this down. Jesus is waiting for you to open the door, but so is Satan. Jesus stands at the door and he knocks, but sin is crouching outside your door, your front door. So is Satan just going to bust down the door and barge his way in? No, he can't make you a zombie ant. He can't just infiltrate your mind. However, you got to understand, it is possible for you to open the door and let Satan in. That is possible. But who in their right mind would do that? Think about it for a second. Let's say after church today, you go home from church and you take off your Sunday clothes and put on your comfy clothes because that's what 99% of you do. And you're chilling on the couch and there's no football to watch since, the NFL season is over. So you're going to watch, who knows, maybe a Nat Geo episode on zombie ants because you just heard about it. So let's say you put on your comfy clothes this Sunday afternoon and you're chilling on the couch and all of a sudden out of nowhere there's a knock on the door. And normally you would pull up your phone and look at your Ring camera, but you took that off your wall and smashed it. So you're going to go look through the peephole, okay? And you look through the peephole, and let's just say that Satan is standing on the other side of the door. You know, red robe, pitchfork, horns, fangs, Satan. What would you do? Would you open up the door and be like, come on in, mother-in-law? That was a low blow. No, you might say, I'm saying, I wouldn't say that. My mother-in-law is awesome. Kathy, if you happen to be watching, I love you. You're my favorite mother-in-law that I've ever had. You look through the peephole, you see Satan. Maybe you open the door and be like, come on in, Michelle Lujan Grisham. I'm getting some angry emails today. I'll tell you. And guess what? I'm just going to forward them to Michelle Lujan Grisham. I don't really care. No, but hang with me for a second. You're chilling on the couch. You get a knock on the door. You look through the peephole, right? Satan's standing there. Really, what would you do? What would you do? Some of you kids, you'd be like, I'm not answering the door. You answer the door. I'm not going to answer the door. Even some of you ladies, you'd be like, shh, pretend we're not home, right? If we're quiet, maybe he'll go away. Some of you guys, what you'll do, you go into your closet, you go into your safe, you come back with your 12 gauge, you open up the door, say hello to my little friend. That's what some of you guys would do. But if you don't have a gun, you don't have like a crowbar or something to defend yourself, even some of the guys, you'd be like, I'm going to deadbolt the door. I'm not opening it. Satan is on the other side of the door. I'm not going to open the door, Most of us would not open the door. And here's the reality. Satan knows that. He's crouching outside your door. But he knows if you look through the peephole and you see him standing there, you're not going to open the door and let him in. So what does Satan do? Look at what Satan does. 2 Corinthians 11:14. Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Why? So maybe you'll open the door. Did you know that there's entire religions that are based on people having an encounter with an angel of light? Did you know that back in the 1800s, a young man by the name of Joseph Smith claims to have had an encounter with an angel of light and who told him to start the religion of Mormonism? Satan masquerades as an angel of light. Masquerades, trying to disguise himself. Because nobody in the right mind would open the door when Satan's on the other side of the door. So what does he do? He disguises himself. And he tries to convince you to open up the door. You're not going to open up the door and be like, come on in, Lucifer. You're not going to do that. You're not going to open up the door and be like, come on in, Beelzebub. Come on in. You're not going to do that. So he disguises himself. And sometimes the disguises are not that much of a disguise. Sometimes people invite Satan into their heart, into their mind, into their home. You ever play a Ouija board? For people that play with Ouija boards, you're inviting evil into your home. You're opening the door to your home for Satan. So that's kind of an obvious way of inviting Satan into your home. But there's perhaps less obvious ways of people opening up the door and not realizing it. If you ever go to a tarot card reader, you ever go to a psychic, I'm already making people mad. I might as well make more people mad. If you ever go to a medicine man, it could be that the psychic and the medicine man actually do have power. But where's that power coming from? Not God. Look at what God says in the book of Leviticus. Leviticus 19:21, God says, do not turn to mediums or seek out spiritists, for you will be defiled by them. He says, I am the Lord your God. You don't need to go to power elsewhere. Let me be God. Who's God? Not you. Let me be God in your life. I am the Lord your God. So sometimes it can be really obvious for people to open up their door and let Satan in. Sometimes it's not as obvious, though. Sometimes it's not as obvious of ways that people inadvertently, accidentally invite Satan into their home. One of the common ways is through TV shows. What you watch on Netflix, what you watch on Hulu, what you watch on Apple TV. Is the content that you're consuming, the shows that you're watching, is it God-honoring? Or are you perhaps planting these seeds of demonic activity, dark activity, satanic even activity? People oftentimes aren't aware that the music that they listen to can invite evil into their hearts, into their minds. Look at what the Apostle Paul says in the book of Romans. Romans 10:17. Paul says, faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word about Christ. Faith comes from hearing, which is why I tell people all the time, you should come to church more than just once a month, more than once a semester, more than just once every Christmas and Easter. We call you Creasters. For those of you who come just Christmas and Easter, we call you Creasters. I tell people all the time, you should come to church more frequently. Why? Because faith comes from hearing. The more of God's word that you hear, the more your faith is built and established. So I'm glad that you're here today. I'm glad that you're watching online. But the opposite is also true. Faith in the wrong things can be built by listening to the wrong things. Write this down if you're taking notes. If you listen to the wrong thing, you increase your faith in the wrong thing. If you listen to the wrong advice, the wrong mentors, the wrong shows, the wrong music, the wrong lyrics, if you listen to the wrong thing, you will increase your faith in the wrong thing. And here's what you've got to understand. What comes in is what goes out. And there is a battle going on for your soul, for my soul. The Apostle Paul says this in Ephesians 6:12. He says, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. We are in a battle. Friends, like it or not, believe it or not, we are in a spiritual battle, which is why last week I shared one of my favorite quotes from John Piper. He said, you will never understand what prayer is for until you realize that life is war. There's another quote that John Piper says as well that I really liked, and I wanted to share it with you as well today. He says, prayer is like a wartime walkie-talkie, not a cell phone to your butler. Prayer is like a wartime walkie-talkie, not a cell phone to your butler. Prayer is what you and I need to incorporate when we are in a spiritual war. Why do you think we invested the last 8 weeks of this church unpacking how to pray? The reason why is because, friends, we're in a spiritual war. We're in a battle, and it's over not just life and death, it's over our spirituality. It's over our eternity. Which is why it's of utmost importance that we take the advice, heed the advice from Solomon, wisest man of all time, who says in Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your what? Guard your heart. For everything you do flows from it. Above everything. Notice what Solomon doesn't say. He doesn't say, hey, it's a good idea. It's one of the things you should do. He says, no, above everything else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from your heart. And friends, the moment you lower your guard is the moment that Satan might come in. You might inadvertently, accidentally invite Satan in by lowering your guard. Write this down. You're playing with fire by lowering your guard. You're playing with fire. And friends, you and I cannot afford to play with fire. You and I cannot afford to lower our guard, which is why Peter says in 1 Peter 5:8-9, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith. Your enemy, the devil, Satan, prowls around like a roaring lion. He's crouching at your front door. He's waiting for you to open the door of opportunity. He's masquerading as an angel of light. He's doing everything he can to convince you to open up the door and invite him in. Above all else, guard your heart. When you don't guard your heart, oftentimes you invite Satan into your home. And what we see in Luke 22, verse 3, if we go back to that, it says, Satan entered Judas. But Satan can't just kick open the door. He can't just turn you into a zombie ant like a fungus in the Amazon. He can't just take over control. You must invite him in, which what we see here, Satan entered Judas. At some point, Judas must have somehow opened the door for Satan. So when did he do that? When did Judas open the door for Satan? Well, there's a story that takes place prior to this. And the story that takes place is at one point, Jesus is invited to a dinner party. Jesus goes to the dinner party. A bunch of his friends are there. Some of the disciples are there. Judas is there. But so is Martha. Martha's there. Lazarus is there. You might remember Lazarus. He's the dude that died, and then Jesus brought him back to life. And this part of the story is after Jesus already resurrected Lazarus. So Lazarus had already died. Jesus brought him back from the dead, and Lazarus is at this dinner party. So they're all chilling at this dinner party. Jesus is there. And at one point, Martha, she's got a pint of expensive perfume. It's worth like an annual salary, a year's worth of money. And she takes this perfume and she pours it on the feet of Jesus. Martha pours this expensive perfume on Jesus' feet. The aroma fills the room. Everybody knows that she just put this expensive perfume on Jesus' feet. Now, why would she do that? This is worth a year's salary. This is expensive perfume. Why would Martha do that? Because she's thankful. Her friend Lazarus had died, and now he's back from the dead again. So she's grateful. This is what people do when they're grateful. This is why so many people tithe to this church. It's why so many people at this church give above and beyond their tithe. Why? Because when you have something that you're grateful for from God, you want to express your gratitude and say, God, you've given me so much. I want to give back to you. People who give to this church, for the most part, they don't give out of obligation. They give out of gratitude. That's exactly what Martha was doing. They're at this dinner party, and Martha busts out this perfume. It's worth an annual's worth of income, and she pours the whole thing out on Jesus' feet. Meanwhile, Judas is watching. He's like, what the heck would you do that for? And here's where we pick up the story, John 12, verse 4. This is one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray Jesus, objected and said, why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. Now, again, why did she do that? She did that because she has gratitude for Jesus. But Judas, he says, why don't you take that perfume, sell it, and give the money to the poor? Did Judas really care about the poor? No. How do we know he didn't care about the poor? Because of the very next verse, verse 6. Judas did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. Here in John 12, we discover that Judas was a thief. Who did he steal from? How was he a thief? We find that in the next part of the verse. As keeper of the money bag, Judas used to help himself to what was put into it. In other words, Judas had been stealing from Jesus. Judas had been stealing from the other 11 disciples. Judas, when he saw Martha pour out a year's worth of annual salary and perfume on the feet of Jesus, he saw that as money down the drain. He said, why don't you take that perfume, sell the perfume, and give the money to the poor? What he really meant was, Martha, why do you take that perfume, sell the perfume, and put the money in our money bag so I can get what you just gave Jesus? Judas was a thief. You see, here's what you have to understand about Satan. Satan is not all-powerful like God is, but he's always watching. And he's watching for a moment that you are selfish. He's watching for moments that you don't trust God. He's watching for moments that you commit secret sins. And when you commit these sins, when you're selfish, when you don't trust God, that's the moment when Satan realizes that is your weak spot. And once he discovers what your weak spot is, that's exactly where Satan is going to exploit you. He's going to target you, and he's going to attack you in your weak spot. And when Satan is able to wiggle his way into your life, into your home, into your heart, into your mind, when he does this, that's the moment when everything becomes unraveled for you. Now that's the bad news. Here's the good news. The good news is that no matter how unraveled your life has become, no matter how disheveled it has become, no matter how bad it seems right now, there's hope in Jesus. Why? Look at what Colossians 1:17 says. It says, he, speaking about Jesus, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. In other words, Jesus holds all things together. Write that down if you're taking notes. Jesus holds all things together. It doesn't matter how bad your life has become. It doesn't matter how many things have hit the fan. It doesn't matter how unraveled everything might have become in the last few months, few years, few decades, or whatever. Why? Because Jesus can hold all things together.